Good afternoon. Hope everyone is doing well and happy Monday. It's nice to be here with everyone this afternoon. We'll get started in just a minute. Today is the last Monday in November of 2019, and we are going to be talking about anxiety in children today. Very important topic, something that is near and dear to me as I was a child with anxiety and also because I work with children with anxiety. So lots and lots to say about it. A couple announcements just to start. On December 3rd, I am doing an online workshop about finding joy in the chaos of the holidays. I always create courses that I actually need for myself. So I hope you will join me for that one. It's $35, fully online. You can join from anywhere. It'll be at 8 p.m. on December 3rd. I'll put a link underneath here. And I also started a Facebook group so that we can just share some moments of joy throughout December so that we all stay sane and we have some moments of enjoyment for the holidays. I got a lot of messages from people about looking for more joy in their lives. So that's what we're going to focus on. Okay. The next announcement is that on December 4th, I will be at the Artist Collective in Westwood for our monthly meditation and discussion. So if you're in Bergen County and you want to get together for some mindfulness practice, come on over to the Artist Collective. It's right by the theater there in Westwood. It's a really great little space. And the last announcement I have for you is that, as most of you know, I am designing an online course for educators coming in the new year. Really excited about that. Lots of wonderful stuff to help prevent burnout and to manage the day-to-day in the classroom, as well as strategies for students. Okay, so let's move right in to talk about anxiety in children. Anxiety in children. So what are some of the causes of anxiety in children? We're seeing a lot of this happening nowadays. We're learning a lot about anxiety being on the rise in our youth. And we know that anxiety is really not going to be brought on by just one thing alone. So it's usually a combination of brain chemistry, personality and temperament, and life events. Okay, so it's kind of a nature-nurture situation. One child might be exposed to the same kind of environment as another, but their brains are going to react differently. So I will tell you that the common causes of anxiety that we're seeing now in our adolescents is around social anxiety. Particularly, we're seeing an uptick in social anxiety related to social media. So there's been a lot of studies that have been written about this, and we're really just coming to understand the effects of social media on our psyche, on our minds, and on our brains. And we are finding that excess social media use is associated not just with anxiety, but also depression and sleep disturbances in our youth in particular, when they're in this very malleable stage of brain development. So we need to be aware of that. Of course, other causes of anxiety are your typical experiencing loss in their lives, or a divorce, maybe abuse. Also, being surrounded by parents or adults who are anxious can be anxiety producing for children. So if you are a parent and you're constantly hovering and sending the message that the world is a scary place, don't do that, you're going to fall, oh, don't touch that, it's dirty, right? If we're constantly sending this message that the environment and the world is a scary place, then we are going to sometimes have children who adopt those thinking patterns. So we need to kind of watch ourselves in that way. What else did I tell you? So the common anxiety we're seeing right now is around social anxiety. In younger kids, we're seeing some selective mutism, which is the situation where a child might go to school or be in certain situations where they refuse to speak. I saw a lot of that as an educator, trying to kind of get a child to feel comfortable enough to share in class, to speak even to the teachers. So social anxiety might look like mutism in young children, whereas in older children it might look like some of the things we're seeing online. They're constantly second guessing themselves as to what they should say, what they should have said in social situations. I work with a lot of teens, both online and in person, that struggle with this kind of social anxiety. We also see some typical phobias in children, such as phobias of needles or being afraid of the dark. And these can be perfectly developmental, not necessarily something to worry about. Separation anxiety as well. In the early years, we see children who are afraid to leave their parents' side, which is quite typical between the ages of 1 and 3. And then sometimes in the older years, we see this separation anxiety take a turn to fear that children will be left alone. The child fears that the parents might die. And what I want to focus on here is to know the difference between normal anxiety, developmental, just common human anxiety versus an anxiety disorder, is when the anxiety is getting in the way of daily life. That's when we want to have some kind of an intervention. So let me say that again. When the anxiety is presenting in a way that it is interfering with a child's daily life, it is stopping them from doing the things that they need to do or that they want to do, that's when we want to seek some treatment, to seek some kind of intervention. So what do we not want to do for our kids with anxiety? Well, one of the things we don't want to do is to kill them with toxic positivity. All right, as parents, educators, as adults in general, we often want to brush off some of the problems that our children have because in the grand scheme of things, it doesn't seem important to us. However, their little brains are reacting to stress-provoking incidences in the same way that ours is. So we need to remember to take them seriously. So what we don't want to say is, don't worry, you're fine, everything's okay, look at the bright side, right? So that's pretty much sending the message of negating how they feel completely. If I'm coming to you and I'm having a moment of anxiety, or I'm feeling really worried or stressed or fearful, and all I'm getting back from you as my parent or as my teacher is, oh, don't worry about that, you're totally fine, look at the bright side, you have to, you know, have this, have some grit, right? If I'm getting that back from you, then I am not feeling heard at all. So we also don't want to avoid anxiety-producing situations. Okay, we do not want to avoid the anxiety-producing situations. So if your child has an anxiety of the dark or a phobia about certain things, about being left alone, or you have an 8th grader who won't stay home by themselves, the idea is not to completely avoid that, because that's actually making the phobia last longer, and it is telling the brain that, yes, this is something to be afraid of, right? So we are going to avoid that at all costs. So we want to be really careful in those situations. Now, I'm not saying if the phobia or the fear or the anxiety is really traumatic that we want to, you know, re-traumatize our child, but to put our children in a little bubble where we don't allow them to experience any anxiety or worry or to face that thing that is hard for them is not doing them any favors. Okay, and that's really hard for us as parents. I know for me, I have a 4-year-old who really struggles with some sensory issues around her clothing, and it is a challenge for me, but I have to let her figure out how to manage the frustration. So I sometimes have to just calmly watch, breathe, and acknowledge her emotion when she is having a fight with a certain shirt or a fight with her pair of socks, instead of fixing it for her, which is hard. So if we don't want to avoid the situation that causes the anxiety and we don't want to kill them with toxic positivity, then what do we do? Well, here are some tips of things that we can do for our children when they are in a moment of anxiety. The first thing is to practice reflective listening, okay? Stating back and validating the feeling that the child is having, okay? So you might say something like, if a child comes to me and they are really lamenting about something that's going on with them, I want to just try my best not to solve the problem, but state back what I am hearing. Oh, it sounds like that was a really hard time today on the playground for you. Tell me more about that, right? I want them to continue to talk about it. I am just it's like I'm mirroring what they're saying and validating whatever emotion they're having. So, wow, that's really frustrating. Oh, that sounds really stressful. That's really hard. Saying things like this sounds really simple, but it's validating the feeling behind the story that the child is telling, and that is empowering. Okay, so before we even just suggest any kind of problem solving, we want to validate and connect with the child. And then if maybe you have a teen who's not so forthcoming, but you know that they're anxious, you're seeing the signs, they're starting to shut down, they're starting to be more skittish and jumpy, irritable, you're expecting that there's some anxiety there, but they are not about to come and tell you about it, well, then you can start using some noticing and wondering statements with that child. So you might say something like, I noticed you walked in the door and threw your book bag on the floor. I'm wondering if you're feeling angry about something, right? I'm noticing that your face looks like this. I'm wondering if there's something on your mind. So just kind of throwing it out there to the teen or the adolescent who might not be so forthcoming by using some curiosity. I'm noticing this. What are you noticing? I'm noticing that when you come home from school, your face looks like this, or, you know, whatever that is. What are you noticing? And then the next step, once you have the child maybe talking or disclosing a little bit, trying to get to that place where you can reflect back an emotion, then asking, are you open for feedback? Are you open for feedback? Because sometimes our kids just want us to listen, and that's okay. Sometimes the best thing that we can do is just listen reflectively, be there for the child, and let them vent and say whatever it is that they need to say. So if the child is open for feedback, then there are a few ways that we can do this. First, you could try a strategy like problem solving. So a lot of times our kids get anxious about things that are worst case scenarios, right? They get anxious about failing something, or they get anxious about, how they're going to be rejected by someone. They get anxious about going to school, whatever that may be. So you might problem solve by saying something like, so what's the worst thing that could happen, and could we handle that? Okay, what's the worst thing that could happen in that situation? Oh, well, she says no, and then I'm embarrassed or what have you. Okay, well, could we handle that? That would be really hard. That would really stink. But could we handle that? Will we live if that happens? Yes or no? So this is a strategy of playing it out to the end, right? Playing it out to the end. You might also, if the anxiety is more general, and the child or the student is just generally, excuse me, feeling anxious, you might try a strategy that I call changing the channel. So changing the channel practice is after we have validated how we're feeling, after we notice, like, I'm sitting here with this crushing anxiety in my chest, I'm not sure how to get rid of it, I don't even know what I'm anxious about, right? One of the strategies we can do once we've validated that that's how they're feeling right now is to change the channel in the mind. And if you can imagine this, just like on the television, we're going to flip the attention to something else, something that might help to calm the nervous system. So for one of my students that I work with, he loves being at the beach. It's his happy place. It's just what he does to feel relaxed, my mother as well. So we just use this cue word, beach, to help him shift into that situation, into that scenario. Okay, so I'm just going to move my mind to feeling like I'm on the beach, I'm enjoying the weather, I see the seagulls, I'm smelling the salt air. It's like a little mini vacation in the mind. But what the thing is that the mind doesn't realize that, this is just a movie playing rather than your experience in real life, and it will help the body to calm that nervous system down so that I can get into a better state of mind. Notice that I'm not trying to fix the problem. I'm not trying to say don't feel that way. I'm just saying if there is a general malaise, anxiety, just free and floating, that sometimes shifting the attention, changing that channel in the mind can give a little bit of body relaxation so that we can get more into that logical thinking mind to be able to move forward. Okay, so just to recap, and then we're going to wrap it up. We want to be aware of the types of anxiety that our children are experiencing lately, which we're seeing a lot of social anxiety in schools and in the field and at home. We want to notice that sometimes the social anxiety in little ones is more clinginess or selective mutism, whereas in older children it might look like some of the issues we're seeing with online fears and phobias of how they are being perceived by others. One misstep and their micro celebrityhood is now over and they're being trolled by their friends online. We want to acknowledge that some anxiety is normal, it's a human experience, but that when the anxiety starts to interfere with daily life, when it stops the child from doing the things they need or want to do, that's when we want to start to intervene and really address this. We do not want to go into the toxic positivity, and we do not want to avoid situations that produce the anxiety, but rather we want to practice reflective listening. We want to ask the child if they're open for feedback or if they'd like a suggestion or if they'd like to problem solve. And then we want to use a strategy if needed, like a calm down box, a set of strategies that you've already practiced and know that they can dip into to use, or maybe even doing the change the channel practice. Okay, that's what I have for you today. Thank you for being here. It's nice to see you. If you're watching this later, make sure you check that out. I'm also going to put out a freebie of a counting breaths practice that can be practiced by students and children of all ages, even adults. So be on the lookout for that in this link as well. Okay, guys, take good care and have a wonderful day.